Welcome into the Blerd Wire, where we are discussing another fabulous cinematic masterpiece that came out a little bit before our times, but we can still reflect on how good it was and how it impacted the film industry for eons to come, and that is Dune. Not
I
not
th-
Dune from 2021, Dune from 1984, just to make sure
yes,
we
we are like 40 years behind on relevant topical events.
yeah. Uh, but because Dune Part 2 is out, it's topical to talk about the one that came out in 1984, which it was it was interesting to say the least. I feel like I have newfound appreciation for why Denis Villeneuve decided to split it into two parts after watching Dune 1984. And I think that's my biggest takeaway from watching that movie.
Yes, obviously we did not grow up with this movie.
Mhm.
We were not around when it was more relevant in the 80s, but its status as one of those weird this feels more like a David Lynch movie than it does a proper Dune movie. And I can see like why he himself may have been interested or intrigued in the source material to
Mhm.
go into it, because Dune is a very weird book and David Lynch is a very weird director who loves these unexplained little quirky things, and together they make a not that great combination.
Yeah, so it's like I guess objectively speaking, like I th- I- it's hard for us to like really go in because it's like I can't really say like objectively whether it's like a good or bad movie because I wasn't around in the 80s, so I didn't really know like what the special effects were, like what you can actually do in the 80s. But when you compare it to 80s movies like Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, it's it's not really there. I'd say the special effects probably are they're not they're not that far off from Star Wars, but like as far as plot, the
No, they're
weirdness, the
terrible.
dialogue, I feel like yeah, they are terrible. I think like what resonates in my mind is like sometimes I think the difference between Star Wars and Dune at this time is that um the people that directed Star Wars with George Lucas and all that, they understood what they couldn't do. Like he would say something, George Lucas would be like, "Hey, I want to do this," and he'd be like, "Hey, we can't do that. That technology doesn't work." In
Mhm.
Dune, because he was going off of the book, I don't think David Lynch understood what he could and could not do with the special effects. So like when they have the shields and he's fighting with Gurney, and Patrick Stewart was in this, which was nice. I didn't realize
Mhm.
that until I saw it. And like you just see like these metallic boxes. It's like, hey,
Yes.
maybe make the decision to just pull that
Maybe we
because you
don't
don't
need
have.
it's kind of like, you remember, because an analogy like we grew up with was like early 3D like games and like 3D models in games, where like the PS1, where like people for the very first time were like making three-dimensional polygons like in games, and how a lot of them did not necessarily age well, because it's a budgeting new category for them to explore. And special effects at that time were maybe in that same category, and they felt this desire, ooh, it's the hot new thing, adding this visual effect as like shields. How cool. It's not.
It's not. I.
There's a reason a lot of like the best shots from, like, you use the Star Wars comparison. A lot
Mhm.
of the best shots are practical, and practical effects age so well. Like
Yeah.
the opening shot of A New Hope, where it's the Princess Leia's ship, and it's coming up against the Star Destroyer, and it kind of like fits two little models, and it looks great today.
Hmm. Hmm. And so it's one of those things that's like obviously when you do that, obviously the film doesn't end up aging very well. So like now here we are doing 1984, and like here we are like 20, no, what, we're 40 years later, and it's like it kind of seems like a parody almost of Dune itself. Like if you were trying to make fun of the book Dune, this kind of feels like the kind of movie you would make. And like it's hard to explain because it's like I feel like the actors take themselves seriously in the movie, but it's
Mhm.
almost like it feels like you can't enjoy this movie if you take it seriously. Like it feels like in Dune, in Denis Villeneuve's Dune, we are immersed into the storyline and we are like observing everything that happens. This feels like they're giving us performance for us on stage, and they're like trying to be larger than life because that's part of like the performance um atmosphere, if that makes sense. Like it kind of feels like you're
Mhm.
watching like a play, or I don't want to say a clown show because that feels really mean, but that's kind of where I'm getting at.
I know what you like, a stage play recorded
Yeah.
recorded on film.
Like it doesn't feel that far off. Like I don't know if you watched Hawkeye, but like at the end they had like the Avengers play or like save us all in the mess we're in. It's like that, like what they're doing on stage kind of feels like what this entire movie was.
I can I can see what you mean. I will say I think there's something so unique about it, and I love whenever we can get multiple different adaptations of a thing. In this case, the Frank Herbert's Dune, and we can see what each person who decided to like create this movie in this case, what they liked about Dune and how that turned into the focal point of their interpretation of it. Because
Hmm.
Dune is very complex. There's a lot
Yeah.
to it. Denis Villeneuve really focused on the characters, very specifically Paul's journey. So a lot of the extra world building, a lot of the weirdness that would make it harder to understand certain parts, and to help keep it focused, he cut a lot of that out, cut the fat
Hmm.
in that
Hmm.
sense. And it made for a very compelling like story and a very compelling read of Paul as a character. Um Dune, the 80s Dune, David Lynch's Dune does not follow that at all. David
Yeah.
Lynch is very fascinated by the outlandedness of Dune, because the opening scene, a totally fresh scene that is nowhere in the books, that you wouldn't get proper descriptions of until later in the series, is of a space navigator, which is a person that has consumed so much spice that their physical form has been transformed into that of a fish monster. and it's and it's stuck sitting in this like tank of spice enriched fluid that it has to permanently live in, and it approaches the emperor. Like what a weird, like crazy, no hand holding, no explanation or anything. Like, no, that's a fish, dude. Get used to it.
Yeah. It's one of those things, like even David Lynch, like to this day, apparently he kind of like disowned the film, and it's like David Lynch, like that, this is your thing, this is what you do.
This is your
But like
baby.
even some of the reviews that came out during that time, like some people even said like how the Baron was like, so I guess my question, because you know more about the Dune books than I did, I don't know if it was the Baron, but like they described that like this Dune was like hugely homophobic because they were depicting the Baron as like this crazy sadistic character, and he seemed like he was gay, but I didn't know if I got that perception from the movie itself. Was that ever a storyline kind of in Frank Herbert's Dune books?
It is a very poor take of a queer character, because
Okay.
Baron is gay, but in a uh gay character is evil kind of way. A
Okay.
very old stereotypical portrayal of a gay man, because there's no loving consensual relationships that he has. It is mostly rape
I'm like,
of young boys.
then
Very
I'm like,
disgusting and gross stereotypes.
I can't even say that it's a stereotype because I don't know any gay people like that. Like it's not like you think stereotype is like it's typical for this, but like I've never even met anybody like that. So that's I see why that got negative reviews on that. And it looks like, and Denis didn't even really touch on it, and that's probably likely because he wants us to focus on well, the Baron did kill all these people on House Atreides, and that's the main thing that we're getting at here.
Yeah, that is a very gross aspect that is not used for any
Yeah.
enhancing of any thematic depth. It's kind of just there, and it's a really gross thing that I really wish did not exist in the original portrayal of Dune.
Yes. Well, at least, a lot of things were rectified in that way. And you could see why Denis made the decisions that he did. I wonder if he's even seen this movie cuz like I feel like the fact that he was able to make he probably has seen it. Yeah, he's probably
Probably.
seen it. Just to know like what to avoid, I think as well. Um but it's one of those things that just yeah, it doesn't really age that well. But I mean, we got to see Sting, which it's kind of exciting to see him as a psychopath instead of a
Who,
guitar player.
who do you prefer as Fade? Is it Austin Butler or is it Sting?
I think if I wasn't such a big fan of Zoe 101 growing up, I might say Sting, but because I know Austin Butler from back then, I think I have to go with Austin Butler.
You sure?
I
Because
know.
I think Sting makes me laugh because he just does like your like almost like he's trying to do a Joker impersonation
Hmm.
at points, just like comically like laughing maniacal kind of sociopath, which
Yeah.
which again just feels like a dream. And in that way, I really feel like this is a David Lynch movie before it is anything else.
Yep. And that's why it's like everybody that's like he kind of disowned it after a while and was like, oh, I had like all this stuff in here, but it's like, David, like I feel like the movie only turned out like this because you directed it. Like you did have like an impact on it, but that's part of that's part of how it goes sometimes. And the thing that really, I think the one thing I will say, had this movie come out 10 years before,
Mhm.
everybody will be talking about how it paved the way for Star Wars. But because it came out in 1984 and a lot of people don't realize, like even George Lucas has said like he's tried to say that like a lot of his Star Wars isn't really inspired that much by Dune, and then it's like Spice,
It is.
Emperor, Imperium, like there's no way Star Interstellar Travel, like Star Wars is so inspired by Dune. Like
It
you don't even know.
it absolutely is. The
Absolutely.
hubris to say no.
Yeah, and he's like, it's one of those things. Like, just lean into it, George. Like, you don't have to pretend like you made all this up. Like, part of it comes from Dune, but because of that, I think a lot of people will see Dune as more of like a Star Wars copy because, like, the average fan doesn't know how similar the two stories are. So, like, when it came out in 1984, probably why it got a lot of comparisons to Star Wars and why a lot of people thought it was an inferior Star Wars because they didn't realize that it comes before that, like it was written before Star Wars even came out, and it actually did pave the way for Star Wars, even though what we got in 1984 was not quite what anybody wanted.
Hmm. And I feel like the parts that he chose to focus on in the movie, it's crazy that it's this combination of like adapting an incredibly dense, long book into a movie that feels slow and boring at times. Like, how is it not like quicker paced for how much ground
For
it
how much he
ends up
shoved in here.
covering?
Yeah.
But the first time I ever saw this movie, I had fallen asleep by the end
Yeah, that's fair.
because it had put me into such a bore. It felt like there was no reason to keep watching, and
Yep.
it such a bummer because I think there's something there. I think there's like this nugget of just this wacky fever dream that could have been more interesting if it leaned into that more. But I think things with like goofy special effects, which don't necessarily even feel goofy enough to be like cartoonishly bad, and then like really boring and bland pacing that keeps you disinterested. I don't know. It's a
I,
mess.
I feel like David Lynch came up in a time where or like when he was making this movie, I think he realized how weird, because the book is weird. Like, let's not deny it. Even
Mhm.
Dune. like the ones that Denis Villeneuve came out with in 2021, 2024, there are a lot of weird aspects in the movie.
Hmm.
But David Lynch was like, the weirdness is going to carry the movie. I feel
Hmm.
like when he made this movie. And for Denis Villeneuve, he was like, the characters are going to carry this movie. You're going to care about the characters, and then all the weirdness will kind of like complement everything else that's here. But it feels like he kind of um overleaned into the weirdness that he forgot about everything else. It's like, hey, no, we don't need to draw boxes around the characters. We need them to talk so we can understand what makes them,
You're
what
never
drives
gonna
them.
forgive that effect, are you?
I can't, because when it took me so long to realize what the scene
What it actually,
was,
because it
what
you
it
can you
actually
can barely
was.
see Patrick Stewart underneath it. It's just
Like a birthday celebration gone wrong or something. Like he walked into a party city and it just exploded on him. I can't even. Yes. So that's why I think that's, and I haven't even seen, are there any other David Lynch movies that you've seen that like you like what he's done? Because I haven't honestly seen a movie by him besides this
no,
one.
I know it more so from my wife who is really into Twin Peaks. And so I've
Okay.
watched some and listened to a lot of like discussion around Twin Peaks. So I have a general feel for his odd style. Um, but I have myself never really watched much.
Yeah, or anything that he's done. Yeah, I saw that he directed Mulholland Drive, and all I know, I just know that Naomi Watts was in the movie, which is very surprising
Hmm.
because I don't think that movie is as weird as some of his other stuff. Um, but I mean, other than that, so yeah, I mean that's it's an interesting movie. That's for sure. I'm glad that they decided to wait until 2021 to also retell the story. Because I think it could have been done well before then, but I think giving a little extra time to kind of get away from that will
Hmm.
help. Because I feel like a lot of the fans of Dune 1 and 2 don't even know this movie exists,
Hmm.
which is for good reason.
For good, it's a relic of its time,
Yeah.
for sure. And every new thing gives us an opportunity to look back at something older with a different perspective and lens, and certainly having a more faithful and character centric adaptation of Dune to look at this makes it seem even more of a mess.
And like, yeah, and I know usually like when we do films, we start with like what we like about them, and then we kind of depending on the film, I guess. So like, is there anything that, because I guess we talked about what we didn't like about it so much. Is there anything you want to close with on like what you may liked about it? Like any redeeming qualities from this 1984 classic?
I'm I'm glad that he wasn't afraid to portray a 3-year old uh killing a grown man, a 3-year old with like the knowledge and wisdom of generations of women before her.
That was very brave of him.
That
I
was very
agree.
brave. It's a tough, and you know what? It's silly in the moment, but I do in his world, I believe it. And I think
Yeah,
to make it like, yeah, this could happen, I think like that is a plus.
yeah,
It
you
is a
get.
plus. And I like some of the some of the design of like the ornithopters and the harvesters, very naturalistic, like even more so than the recent Dune movies, where they
Mhm.
really feel closer to the descriptions in the book, where they are heavily animal inspired, being like dragonflies, and the harvesters being very like beetles
Mhm.
on the ground. A very helps with like the ecological feel of Dune as a whole. But that's it.
That's
Maybe
it. That took 3 minutes.
maybe I it would have been nice to see one of these maybe like Kyle McLaughlin or Patrick Stewart reprise, or maybe not reprise a role, but
But
have
play a different role. Yeah,
like a
I would
guest
like to see that
cameo
too. Hmm.
honestly, I could see either one of them being probably a better emperor than Christopher Walken
Yeah, I feel like I mean we'll have to talk about that more when we do Dune
when
Part
we get
Two,
to
but
there. But
yeah, I think I was expecting more from Christopher Walken. But
yeah,
anyway,
how about you?
um,
Was there any shining light with with Lynch's Dune?
I like that I have a podcast now where I get to talk about movies
Hmm.
because that's the only reason why I watched this.
Hmm.
Because I wanted to talk about it on the podcast because, that's what we do and Dune is out right now. Um
It's the price of new things. Sometimes you like it, sometimes you don't.
That's the only reason why I can say it wasn't a waste of time for me to watch it. I know that sounds harsh, and I'm sorry, David Lynch, wherever you are, and everybody that was in it. Oh, Patrick Stewart. I liked the fact that I saw Patrick Stewart before he was an X-Men, and
Hmm.
that was cool. And that is all I got.
Really scraping the bottom of the barrel.
I don't even think we're still in the barrel at this point.
We've broken the bottom.
We're
The
just
wood planks have been
scraping the floor.
torn.
Yeah, yeah. It's just yeah, there are some. I mean, I won't go as far to say like it shouldn't have been made because Frank Herbert obviously um created a very engaging world, and I feel
Hmm.
like partly why it was made was because people realized, or or someone realized that like, wow, this is very similar. When Star Wars came out, like, oh wow, this is very similar to Dune.
Hmm.
Maybe we should make a Dune movie. Like, I feel like if Star Wars hadn't come out and been so successful, I don't think we would have ended up getting this Dune movie because I feel like Star Wars just kind of takes a lot of the cool elements of Dune and put them into a galaxy far, far away. And then they're like,
Hmm.
well, let's just go with the original source material. And someone should have been like, do we have the effects for this? And it was like, hey, man, get off my back. So, but it's okay because now we have this fantastic movie in Dune Part 2 that you and I are going to get to talk about in depth with spoilers for anybody listening. There's going to be spoilers next week. It's probably going to be a super long episode because we talked for like an hour after seeing it together in the theaters.
Probably more.
Oh my god. Yeah, that's gonna be a crazy episode. So,
It's gonna be
yeah, it's gonna
it's
be a
gonna be an
crazy
all
episode.
dayer.
All day. Yep. So, yeah, so that is Dune 1984. If you have some, I'm not gonna say like if you have some time to kill, go watch it. If you don't have anything else to do in your life, I would say go watch it.
If your curiosity takes the better of you,
Yes. Or if
go
you want
check
to
it out.
just if you want to appreciate Dune Part 2 a little bit more, go check it out.
Check it
'Cause
out. Why
I think,
not?
and I think one day we're gonna have to, once Dune Part Two comes out in theaters, I mean comes out on streaming, we're gonna watch Dune 1984, then we're gonna watch the 2021, then 2024 back to back, and then we're gonna go back and watch the 1984 one again, just as like a full circle. Look how far we've come moment.
No, thank you.
Where did I lose you? At seeing it twice or seeing it once?
I'm seeing it twice.
Okay,
I will watch it once. I will not watch it twice.
but just not at the end. Okay, okay. So we'll have to decide
Let's
if we want to do it
let's
before
rope
we
in
watch it.
the sci-fi miniseries first before even considering going to see it twice.
That is something I'm actually interested in checking out.
James McAvoy.
Hmm. Funny how Dune's jump started the careers of two Professor X's. Who knew?
Could we be seeing in the future maybe Timothy Chalamet play Professor X in a much farther in the future
Even
X-Men
here's the
reboot?
thing: Austin Butler's already got the bald look
He
down.
already he does already have the bald look.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying. So
I
yeah,
think join us next time for our future X-Men.
predicting our future X-Men based upon the Dune series. So yeah, I guess that's all we can really say about Dune 1984. It is a movie that existed, and we have just reviewed it, which I think we should be proud of that we spent this long talking about it.
Mhm. Without falling asleep.
So until next time, guys, feel free to leave your thoughts, your comments down below on what you maybe liked about Dune or maybe didn't like, because obviously we were not huge fans of it, but we still would love to hear your thoughts. And then, of course, join us next week when we delve in again to Dune Part 2.